In the Renaissance period, the ideal female body shape was full-figured and voluptuous. They were seen as goddess-like symbols of fertility that should be revered and respected. Clothing was free-flowing and it showcased the fuller figure. In the Victorian era, the ideal shape was the S-curve, or an extreme hourglass silhouette. This was the first time women distorted their bodies to fit in, and they used a corset to get the smallest waist possible. These corsets caused bodily damage such as organ failure and the inability to bear children. The Roaring Twenties spearheaded the movement of the flapper girl and the transition into androgyny. Designers like Coco Chanel created a new boy-like shape to free women of the Victorian corsets. Some would even bind their breasts to seem more shapeless. A straight, baggy dress was the key style of this era. In the 50s, actresses like Marilyn Monroe and Elizabeth Taylor made the hourglass shape the new ideal body image. However, American culture at the time told women that they needed to catch a man and marry as soon as possible. This meant they dressed to attract and never looked sloppy. The transition into the 60s brought a new supermodel from England, Twiggy. Just a young girl, her super skinny, androgynous, alien-like figure became the new center of attention. The miniskirt was also invented, showing off more skin than ever before. The shift from the older, curvier woman to young, twig-like girl was in full swing. In the 80s, the new focus for women was fitness. Fashions were extremely fitted, so having a good body was critical. The number of eating disorders also increased significantly in the 80s, due to the pressure on women to maintain a toned figure, but to not be too muscular. In the 2000s and modern day, there is more pressure than ever to be extremely skinny, and this is especially prevalent with models in the fashion industry. More and more models are developing eating disorders such as anorexia and bulimia. However, the industry is making steps to combat this.
At Israel's Fashion Week, a parade of models in all their skinniness. Critics say this waif-like image glamourizes extreme thinness, encouraging eating disorders. And Israel has become the first country to formally legislate against it.
Something happened in the last 20 years. Always the model was skinny, but not too skinny. And I found that the difference between skinny, thin, and too thin, it's a little different between life and death.
At his studio in Tel Aviv, Adi Bar-Khan is the fashion photographer behind Israel's groundbreaking new law. It bans underweight models from catwalks and commercials using body mass index, a way of estimating healthy weight to decide who can model and who can't. Anyone with a BMI less than 18.5 is out.
Even the supermodel, nobody can get into the Israeli market if they are less than 18.5. Doesn't matter if it's a Kate Moss or Claudia Schiffer or Naomi Campbell. If you're less than 18.5, you are not here.
Other countries like Spain and Australia have set minimum weight limits for certain fashion shows in the past, but Israel's law goes much further. The fashion industry's obsession with being super skinny is an increasingly global public health concern. This new Israeli law may be a step in the right direction, perhaps a way of shocking the international glamour industry into making important changes. But critics say limiting the types of bodies permitted to model may also backfire. Instead of celebrating bodies of all shapes and sizes, they say, it simply rejects extreme thinness. But Adi Bar-Khan knows the dangers that extreme thinness can pose. In his arms is Hilla El-Malik, a former Israeli model dying of anorexia. He found her on the floor of her apartment 5 years ago, too weak to stand. She'd been desperate to keep her weight down and passed away after having a heart attack, he says. in his arms.
So people die just because some schmuck told her, lose 5 billion. That's all. We didn't know how much power we have. We can kill people and we can save people.
And that's what Barkan says he hopes Israel's new law can achieve, slashing eating disorders among models and those trying to emulate them, saving a few lives in the name of fashion. Matthew Chance, CNN Tel Aviv.
We are already seeing huge strides on the issue of body image within fashion. Healthier, fuller-figured models are taking the spotlight, such as Kate Upton and Laura Stone. The Council of Fashion Designers of America also passed a new set of guidelines for models, including a minimum age of 16, mandatory health checks, supplying healthy food backstage at shows, and providing nutrition education.